examination of the meat in the chili supermarket aisle to see a small man that I had never met before quickly approaching me. "Whoa," he said, "I thought you were standing on something." I have always been the tall girl. Throughout my years in lower and middle school, I was the kid at the back of the class photo, the one whose legs didn't fit under the desks, the girl who was too big for the obstacle course on field day. It's like my body never got the memo that you're supposed to stop growing. And when all the other kids slowed down, I kept inching up. Now, at 17 years old, I'm 6'2". Height for me basically started when I did. After one of her ultrasounds, my mom was told that fetal me happened to have a particularly long femur or thigh bone, and that I was going to have super long legs. Well, 17 years later, you can see those long legs sure turned out. So well, in fact, that I had to buy special pants online that are long enough to fit them. Growing so quickly meant that as a toddler, my cute and adorable years were short-lived, and with my early maturation came the assumption that I was always older. 5 meant 8, and 8 meant 12. Because of that, I've really always been treated as if I were older. Moreover, I've been expected to act older. You can imagine the looks my parents would get when their giant, what looked like a 9-year-old daughter, was throwing a fit like a 6-year-old. And the only way to rise above the judgment was to act the part. Sure, I may have lost a bit of my childhood in order to make up for my appearance, but it soon became clear that the more grown-up I acted, the more grown-up I was treated, not only by the other kids, but by the adults as well. I got to Calvert for lower school, and as I grew up, I was almost unaware of the fact that I was abnormally tall. Even though I was consistently either the tallest or second tallest in my grade, it never really occurred to me that I stood out. It was all about perspective. I was friends with some really tall girls, so my height just didn't seem to be out of the ordinary. Of course, people outside of school would make comments, but I guess it just didn't really register. Then there was middle school, the epitome of all my preteen awkwardness. By then, I was still at Calvert, and I was used to my height in conjunction to my peers. I knew I was tall, but mainly I just had no idea how to deal with it. See, while the shorter humans seemed to have no problem figuring out how to move. One of the challenges of growing so quickly was simply knowing where my feet were. The target kept moving every month. After tripping up stairs, catching my feet on each other, and generally failing to realize any kind of spatial awareness, I resorted to basically flopping around. I would stand, shoulders hunched, chin pushed out, contorting my body into what I can only imagine to be borderline simian. Oh, and then the middle school mixers. First off, if I attempt to dance with any seriousness, I end up resembling some sort of manic bird-like creature. So I figured, why not just go all the way with it? I basically flailed, attracting the most embarrassing attention possible to myself. Middle school. Then came high school and my first year at Vermont. All of a sudden, I found myself in a new environment. I was already different for being one of the new girls, but my height made me stick out even more, and I couldn't help but feel a little alienated. So I decided that I was going to fulfill my dreams of becoming a fabulous volleyball player. When someone meets me, there's usually a series of questions that they ask, including, how tall are you, how tall are your parents, and do you play volleyball or basketball? So I figured I would try the sport out. Literally, the only reason why I even made the JV team was because I was obviously the tallest freshman ever. And as the season progressed, my skills did not. And it became very clear very fast that 10 years of swimming had not really developed my hand-eye coordination skills very well. They never played me. I remember before one game, a coach on the opposing team thought he would be funny. "Ref," he yelled, "steroid check on number 14. Rude. I know, he was of 6'2", I couldn't even play volleyball. To me, tall was horrible. It was awkward and abnormal. Tall was the opposite of what a girl should be. It was manly. Every comment, "You're too tall," or "You're taller than my dad," was like a personal attack. I was like a giant, ugly mushroom on an otherwise perfectly manicured lawn, the rest of the grass flawless in uniform, with me stuck right in the middle of it all, lumping above the rest. You see, when you're tall, there's nothing you can do to not stand out. And the worst thing about standing out so much is that you never feel like you really fit in. I don't fit in. And it was getting to be lonely all the way up there by myself. Freshman year, my height became a crisis, and I hated every inch of it. The next year, I applied for the South African Exchange College Scholarship, and I remember one of the questions on the application was to the effect of, "What are you most worried about going on exchange?" I wasn't worried about leaving my family or traveling thousands of miles away from home, or even the potential lion attack. I was worried about being too tall. Leftovers from my freshman crisis still lingered, and I did not want to go through that again. I was worried that people would be as confused by my height as I was. Now, just to clear it up, I'm not a self-help book kind of girl. But when I heard about Ariana Cohen's The Tall Book, A Celebration of Life from on High, I knew I had to get it. I like to think of Ariana, 6'3", as like my best friend. In her book, she describes in detail her experience growing up. She delves into the psychology of both tall people and greater society in relation to height. She manages to explain her evolution of thought and relationship with her height so brilliantly, I absolutely love her. In her words, tall is, objectively speaking, gorgeous. It just is. Remember that. In her book, Ariana was able to put even the darkest corners of my insecurities into words, bringing them into the light. I wasn't alone. So I went to South Africa, and not only did I have an amazing time, but I had an amazing time being tall. I was even featured in the school's fashion show wearing 4-inch heels. That's 78 inches of me. Tall began to feel good. But it wasn't until this past summer that the real magic happened. I spotted a tall woman in the parking lot. She was standing there chatting with 2 other people, and even from far away, I could tell that she was taller than me because her head seemed to be a good foot above the hood of her SUV. She had a kind, happy face, and she was just standing there, laughing like a goddess, that I freaked out. It was like I was meeting a rock star. I was positively giddy with excitement. "Oh my God, Mom, look, she's gorgeous. Oh my God, I have to talk to her. I have to see how tall she is. Is she gonna think I'm weird? It doesn't even matter. I have to see her." I sprinted out to her. "Hello, I love you." I was just wondering, how tall are you? She laughed elegantly and softly and flicked her hair with the back of her hand, 6'6". She said smoothly. I was in awe. I was so overcome that I gave her a hug. She was a bit weirded out by that, I think, but it was so worth it. And then I realized, Ariana is right. Tall can be gorgeous. Not only that, but tall can be strong and powerful and, wait, I'm tall. The more I think about it, the more I'm absolutely convinced that I would not be half the person I am today if I were not tall. I am inherently a fairly private person. I enjoy alone time, but height literally stands out. People don't ignore height, and as much as I used to shrink away from the attention, I've literally been forced to accept it. There used to be a major gap between the person that I presented and the person I actually was. I remember once my friend's mom told my mom that I was like a little, cuddly little bunny inside a big person's body. I was cautious, guarded, and I thought of my height of something that separated me from everyone else. It was a challenge, it wasn't an asset. But more and more, I've noticed a change. One of the points that Ariana remarks on in her book is how height and leadership are in direct correlation. Some people have the choice to either be a leader or a follower. But whether I like it or not, I find myself being thrust into a position of power while others, who might choose to be powerful, are not. My height has taken away that choice. Through bigger things like being elected for Arts Council or for team captain, and even through small things like deciding where to go for lunch, more and more I find myself being put into control. Although initially it might not have felt so natural, now I'm realizing my confidence. I used to be so self-conscious about how my height could be perceived as intimidating, but now I realize that my height doesn't make me, I make my height. So this is my celebration of life from on high. This is me now towering above this lectern, making my public acceptance of something I would have never thought I would be able to say so comfortably.